We are now in Lecture 2, Part 4 on Ingram's law. Here we're going to discuss the indirect relation between law and morality once again, and we're going to posit democracy as the solution to that issue, concept, idea of that the relation between law and morality must be indirect. Democracy then emerges as the moral core of law, and this moral core of law with regard to democracy refers to democracy in its primary, not secondary sense. And proceduralism is the name for thinking of democracy as the right relation between law and morality, indirect relation, that is. And we're going to get to the old question of whether and why, here it's answered in the positive, we have a moral obligation to follow unjust laws. Ingram argues that the indirect relation between law and morals, or with the moral core of the law, one of the articulations of which is freedom, after Hegel, is democracy. Democracy is basically defined for our purposes as one man, one vote. Freedom and morality are preserved and developed and made real by democracy, but only in the secondary sense, by any particular law or policy that is democratically chosen. In the primary sense, democracy preserves and develops freedom in the moral core of the law by its very process, in which rationality and equality of all voters is recognized. So, the way in which democracy links law and morality is not through any particular laws that emerge democratically, but through the very process of democracy itself, since that process of democracy presupposes that all of the participating members are rational and that their rationality has equal worth. In this sense, the relation between law and morals via democracy is indirect. It is less direct than it would be on the natural law theory. The moral validity and fairness of choices made democratically depend less on the nature of the actual choices made than on the process by which they are made. If the process is fair or moral, so are the results, is the idea here. This idea of the relationship between law and morals is called proceduralism. It's the procedure of democracy that makes it moral and also should make it the moral core of law. However, some of the decisions made by a democratic process may be unjust, as the democratic process is not perfect. Errors are possible. People may be swayed by the charisma of leaders rather than evidence and what evidence supports. Self-interest of people may override their rationality when that self-interest is conceived too narrowly, and so on. Democracy is not perfect. So even unjust laws that result from the democratic process entail a moral obligation to be followed, since the process itself is fair and moral. Some serious obligation to be followed, but not an absolute obligation to be followed. As even Ingram admits that while there may be an obligation to follow some unjust laws, this cannot be the case for very unjust laws, as Ingram puts it. We can think of Martin Luther King's acts of civil disobedience to end discrimination codified in law as an example of the latter, not following unjust laws. However much there may be an obligation due to do so if those laws arise within the context of democracy.